Today we are going to be talking about anxiety and the potential reasons that we might be feeling anxious. Now, how many of you have found yourselves maybe while you were doing something fairly ordinary, watching TV, cooking dinner, just hanging out with your friends or your partner, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere it seems, you suddenly have a racing heart or those churning feelings of anxiety, and suddenly you're having a full range of anxiety symptoms and you can't really figure out why. Like there's nothing that happened in that situation that would have potentially triggered anxiety. Or maybe you've been experiencing anxiety for a really long time and your friends and family are asking you, well, what are you so anxious about? Like, what is it that's happening in your life that's causing anxiety? And you just don't have an answer, which can feel pretty painful, I think, because sometimes when we feel like we don't have a reason to feel the way that we do, it almost invalidates or undermines the experience itself. So today we're going to be looking at 3 potential reasons that you might be feeling anxious or experiencing anxiety and why you may not even be aware of those reasons. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deanta and I'm the Intentional Psychologist. I'm also the co-founder of the Unstuck Initiative, which is our online platform supporting people who are feeling fed up with being held back by their anxiety and they're ready to take back ownership of their lives and just thrive and going forward. I am a clinical psychologist and a life coach, and I have over a decade's experience in working with adults struggling with a range of difficulties. But it has become my absolute passion in moving people to becoming unstuck. Now, one of the things that has stood out for me in the last week is this particular question around why am I experiencing anxiety? So many of you have been emailing me and messaging me questions about your experience. I absolutely love it. Thank you. Please keep them coming. Now, this is a pretty broad subject and we can talk about causes and then we can talk about reasons. And while these two seem like they are fairly similar, they're also a little bit different. Now, causes is really all the factors that come together and have an interplay that creates a breeding ground, if you will, for anxiety to happen in your life. We talk about this in a whole lot more detail in our Empower series course, which is in our membership, but we're looking at things like biology and our environment and how these two interact with one another. And we look at things like protective factors and risk factors and how these create more or less of an anxiety experience. Now, that is a whole lot more detailed and it is in our Empower series course. But today I want to look at some specific reasons, 3 in particular, why in a moment you might be experiencing anxiety or why anxiety might have popped up at this time of your life currently. Now, the very first reason that we might be experiencing anxiety is because we are not in alignment with ourselves. So let me explain that a little bit more. When we are doing something or when we find ourselves in a situation or in a decision that we don't feel comfortable about and we are trying to avoid, then we're not paying attention to that particular thing. We don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling, or we don't want to make this uncomfortable decision, or perhaps we're finding ourselves in a situation that doesn't feel good for us. It's not in alignment with who we are or with our values. But for whatever reason, we believe that we can't shift it. And so we kind of try to avoid feeling like we're in the wrong space. So an example of this might be that perhaps you're in a job that you really don't love, or there's something happening in your workspace that feels uncomfortable or doesn't align with your values. And now you feel like you need to move from this job, but for whatever reason, you believe that actually I can't leave this job right now. I have to stay where I am financially or whatever other reasons there might be. And so as a result, you're kind of pushing away this feeling of I need to leave my job. You don't want to pay attention to that feeling or the belief that it's not going well for you because you believe that you have to focus on this right now. Or maybe something in your life has created a feeling for you that doesn't feel good, an uncomfortable feeling, and you don't want to feel that, right? So we push it away and we pretend like it's not there. We pretend like it's not happening. And so what happens is we avoid really important things that really, if we did pay attention to them, we would be more in alignment and more honest with ourselves, I guess. Now, if you remember that anxiety in and of itself is just the brain's way of saying, hello, there is something really important here that you need to be paying attention to. It's telling you to pay attention to this thing. And so when we're not paying attention to something that's really important, life-changing in fact, then our anxiety is going to crop up, right? Because it's this sort of, I guess it's like a disparity between where you're at in your life and the beliefs that you have or the feelings that you really have. And then it's not in alignment and it's causing this friction and it's causing this uncomfortable feeling, which often is anxiety, but also it's the brain going, you haven't paid attention to this and you really need to be. So that's reason number one. The second reason why we might be experiencing anxiety in a particular time of our lives is because there's been an event that's happened that's bumped up against one of our core beliefs. Now, I go into a lot more detail about this again in other spaces because it's a very deep and condensed space. But let's just talk about core beliefs as being some of our inherent beliefs that we hold about ourselves and about the world around us and how we function in the world. Now, I think many of us will resonate with the core belief that I am not enough. I think most humans have that belief, I am not good enough or I am not enough. So that's an example of a core belief. Now, when something happens in your environment that bumps up against that core belief and makes you feel it, then we can have anxiety crop up. So I've used this example before, but I'll talk about it again, where my hubby, as many of you know, had his own run-in, a serious run-in with anxiety in 2014. So what happened there was that he had, and I say had because he's worked through this one, he had a core belief that he was doomed for imminent failure and that one day everything would come crashing down around him. He would be found out to be a fraud and he would just fail and lose everything. That was kind of a core belief that he was holding subconsciously. And then something happened in his business where he had a run-in with a colleague and it called to question something that he had done. And immediately that core belief of his was triggered. Oh my gosh, I've done something wrong. You see, I am a failure and now I'm going to lose everything. And so in that moment, his anxiety just came rushing to the fore because that's an uncomfortable space. When our core belief is called to the front and made to seem true, which it's not, we can feel really anxious about that. And again, remember that the function of anxiety is to tell you there's something really important that you need to be paying attention to. So in that moment, his brain was going, wow, this is important. You've got to fix this. You've got to fix this problem before it all comes crashing down around you. So huge amounts of anxiety that he experienced in that moment. Now, the third reason why you might be experiencing an anxiety attack out of nowhere is because in general, you're finding yourself in a space or in your life where things are feeling pretty stressed and pretty pressured and you're just kind of go, 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 go. And there's lots of things that are feeling stressful, not anxiety provoking, but stressful, but you're putting on a brave face and you're pushing those aside and you're just going forward. You're just progressing and it's important for you to just keep going. These are people who are often very, very busy and they don't have time to pay attention to what they're feeling and they're just pushing it aside and going, right? And so maybe there are feelings of like deadlines that are coming up and that's feeling pressured, so push that away, no, just focus. Or maybe there's another thought about our finances are not great. Okay, no, push that away, just focus. And then there's this sense of, oh, I've got all these clients that I need to reply to. No, push that away and focus. So you can see how when we are in this space, we've got this build-up of stress and energy that's happening in our systems, but we're not letting that air anywhere. We're not giving it any airtime. We're just pushing it away, pushing it away, pushing it away, and focusing forward. Now, I'm going to use this analogy because I think it's just brilliant. If you are like me, and I never learned my lesson with this, you put the rice on the pot, on the stove to boil, you put the lid on, and you walk away. And then I come back, and it's just this awful mess around that pot, right? All the rice, all of the water has just boiled over the edges and made a horrible mess. Because the pressure inside that pot with the steam and the heat has built up to the point at which it had to come bubbling over. And this is what happens often when you're sitting around in a seemingly innocent, normal situation, and all of a sudden you're having a racing heart and some anxiety or a panic attack that comes out of nowhere. Often it's because your system is so strung out that there is this calm moment where it's just going to let that out. That pot is boiling over. Or if you can imagine a balloon that you've blown up and up and up and up, and now it's at the point at which it's either going to burst if you don't let steam out, and you're now in a relaxed space and things are okay, and then suddenly your system goes and it bubbles out that anxiety. It bubbles out that pressure or that stress that you've been feeling. And so it may not necessarily be something that's happened in that moment that's triggered an anxious thought or any of those things. It could simply be that your system is releasing the pressure. But these are the three main potential reasons that might be happening underneath the surface that results in your anxiety. Either the start of it and then it's continued because we have anxiety about anxiety and it being stuck, or we have a situation where we're feeling really stressed and then we have these experiences of anxiety sort of popping out seemingly for no good reason, but in fact there is very good reason. You have been under stress or you have a lot of pressure that's been going on for you, and that's resulted in that. So I guess really the core premise of all of this is that we need to be paying attention to ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves. Like, what is it that's going on in our lives that feels uncomfortable or doesn't sit in alignment with us? Or what are our core beliefs that might need some work because really they're irrational and they're not serving us? Or where are the areas of pressure and stress that we're pushing away, and maybe we need to be releasing some of that in healthier other ways so that our anxiety doesn't creep up when we least expect it to. I really welcome you into a space where you can find a new way of experiencing your anxiety so that you too can become unstuck.